The next super global we're going to have a look at is called cookie. So on the right hand side in the navigation, let's select this one, underscore cookie. If we click on that one, you can see again it's an associative array of variables passed to the current script via HTTP cookies this time. If we scroll down, you can see just one example here. And then you will also see the section C also. And the first item, set cookies, is what we're also going to be looking at. So if we open this one in a new tab, and we'll get back to this in just a moment. But just to let you know, cookie super global is one that actually stores the data on the user's computer. So for instance, if I'm using Firefox, because it uses browser in order to save this cookie on our machine, on our computer, through the browser, we can send the request using PHP or JavaScript to save a specific information on the user's computer. And if we check in Firefox, if we go to Preferences, and then we go to Privacy, you can see Remove Individual Cookies. If we click on that link, you can see we've got several different ones depending on which sites you were basically accessing. We've got one for php.net, as you can see as well. We've got two cookies set here, country and last underscore lang. But do we have anything for our project? Let's quickly check. PHP course. We haven't got anything for this one yet. So we'll have a look at how they basically are displayed in this cookies dialog window of the Firefox browser a little bit later on when we actually set one. But in order to set the cookie, we need to use this set cookie function. The set cookie function returns boolean, which means either true or false, depending on whether it successfully set the cookie we were trying to set. And it takes the first argument, which is the mandatory argument, is the name, and then we have, as you can see, we've got the square brackets. All these following ones are optional. It's the value, then we have the expire, when we want this cookie to expire basically. Then we have a path, we have domain, we have secure, which is of a boolean value as well, and then HTTP only. And let's quickly have a look at what it says. Set cookie defines a cookie to be sent along with the rest of the HTTP headers. Like other headers, cookie must be sent before any output from your script. This is a protocol restriction, and we will have a look at this as well during this lesson. Then we have this requires that you place calls to this function prior to any output, including HTML and head tags, as well as any white space. And as I said, we are going to have a look at this example as well. I'll show you what it causes if you actually use this function after any output to the browser. And then let's have a look at the argument. We have name, which is the name of the cookie, value, which is the value of the cookie. The value is stored on the client's computer. Do not store sensitive information. Obviously, that's pretty important because whatever you're gonna save on the computer, on the user's computer, obviously they can access in some way. And I'm gonna show you as well how you can actually access this file. Assuming the name is a cookie name, this value is retrieved through the cookie, as you can see, this super global, which we've been looking at on this page, and then obviously the name of this cookie that we given this obviously when we were setting it up. Then we have the expire. The time of cookie expires. This is a Unix timestamp, so it is a number of seconds since the epoch. In other words, you'll most likely set this with time, which is the PHP function, plus the number of seconds before you want it to expire. Or you might use a make time function, basically combining the time with seconds and so on. We will have a look at this as well. Then we have path. The path on the server is in which the cookie will be available. If it's set to just /, the cookie will be available within the entire domain. If it's set to full, for instance, then the cookie will only be available within a full. So let's say we've got our PHP course with just a slash. Obviously, we don't see the slash, but it's basically just a domain. If we only set the slash as a path, then it's going to be available to all paths. Let's say if we have as well, say about, and then we have some other folder, it's going to be available to all of these directories. Otherwise, if we select, let's say if we set it as about us, the cookie will only be available for this specific path. It's not going to be available for the main domain. So that's what the path says. Then we have the domain, obviously the domain that the cookie is available to, setting the domain to www dot and then domain name. www is obviously a subdomain. We'll make the cookie available in the www subdomain and higher subdomains, which means we can have www dot something dot and then example.com, for instance, the domain. So for all these which start with www, obviously this cookie will be available, but it's not going to be available to the domain itself without the www subdomain. Cookies available to a lower domain such as example.com will be available to higher subdomains such as www and so on. And then it mentions all the browsers. We don't have to worry about this. Then we have secure, indicates that the cookie should only be transmitted over the secure over a secure HTTPS connection from the client, which is basically when you type HTTPS, which is SSL, in other words, rather than HTTP. And then we have HTTP only. When sure the cookie will be made accessible only through the HTTP protocol. This means that the cookie will not be accessible by scripting languages such as JavaScript. It has been suggested that this setting can effectively help to reduce identity theft through XSS attacks. You can read a little more on this, try and Google this. That was a pretty common problem at some point, but there are certain measures in place these days that can actually prevent this from happening. So these are our arguments. Let's go to our editor and start working with both of these, basically with the set cookie and our cookie super global. So let's start with setting the cookie. So set cookie, and we are going to give it an index of, let's say, name, and I'm going to use my own name, so Sebastian Soliński, and then I want it to be valid for 1 hour, let's say, so 3,600 seconds. So I'm going to use this time function, PHP function, which gives me the current time, and I'm going to plus it, add to it basically 3,600 seconds. And I'm not going to use any other arguments, only these three ones. If we save it, and what I'm going to do is echo again, we're going to use print r to basically output the result of this cookie super global. Then we have and if we now preview everything in a browser, if we go back to our project, refresh, and the array is empty. And now this is another important thing about cookies, because cookies are stored on a visitor's computer. What happens first, when we load the page, the cookie is saved to the file on user's computer, but it hasn't been read after being saved. Basically, it's read when you load the page, but because when we are loading the page, there wasn't any cookie set for this domain in the file, then obviously if we are trying to print anything from this cookie, even if we right before calling this, basically if we go back to the editor, we set it up here, and obviously even though we want to retrieve the values from this super global, they are not available to us because that's just saved the file, but we didn't have a chance to read it yet because it's read when the page first loads. So it's read at this point before this function is being called. We now save to this file, but we still have the output of the file without any cookie in it. So now if we refresh again, I'm just going to comment this line so we don't write it again basically to the cookie. And if we preview everything in the browser, if I now refresh the page, now it reads the file to which we saved earlier, and as you can see, this cookie is now available for this specific domain. Now let's quickly have a look at where this cookie file is placed. So if I just, in the Firefox, I'm just going to use this option here with the question mark, and then I'm going to go for troubleshooting information. And we've got this profile finder here, show in finder, and there we go. This is where our cookie is stored. It's basically this cookies.sqlite file, which is a SQLite database. So this is where all our cookies are stored on our computer. When we obviously, I'm talking about the Firefox, obviously in this case, on on Mac OS X. You might be using Windows or any other system, obviously, and different browser. Obviously, that's going to be in a completely different place as well. So if you don't know how to find, obviously, the path to your cookies folder for your browser on your operating system, try it and Google this. I'm sure you're gonna find some information there. So this is where the file is stored. So obviously, if you would like to find some information, you could obviously open it in some way, perhaps using SQLite, and obviously access the data which we've saved to this file. But now let's open preferences panel of the Firefox as well, and go back to our privacy tab and remove individual cookies. And let's have a look at what we've got now. As you can see, the phpcores.def is already listed here. So I'm just going to filter that so it only displays this specific one. There we go. And we have the cookie with the name, and this is the value, and this is when it's going to expire. As you can see, 2043, which is 843, which is when we basically we technically saved it. Obviously at 4041, this is why it gives us 1 hour, so this is the expiry date. Obviously it should expire at 9:40 p.m. obviously we are already 3 minutes later obviously accessing this file. So as you can see, and it's the path by default is straight /. So let's now remove this cookie, and if we save everything, if we close all these windows, go back to our editor. What else can we do here? We can, let's say, increase this time. Let's set another cookie. Let's actually keep this cookie, and let's set another one. Let's say, what can we call it? School, and let's call it SSD tutorials. And this time, let's say I want it to be valid for 30 days. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use time, then I'm going to add 60 to it, multiply by 60, then multiply by 24, then multiply by 30. What I'm basically doing, 60 seconds, which is 1 minute, by 60 times 60, which is basically giving me 1 hour, time 24 hours and 30 days. So this is basically giving me time from now plus 30 days. This is where I want this cookie to expire. So if we now save this file and preview everything in the browser, the first thing that we're going to see is an empty array, because we've just cleared the cookies for this domain, obviously from within the Firefox preferences. So when we first loaded this page and read the file, there was nothing for this domain. And when we obviously the page has been processed by obviously the browser now, the cookie has been set. So if I now refresh the page again, but let's quickly go back to our editor and let's comment this to set cookies functions. We save it and preview everything in the browser. Now if we refresh, the cookie file has been read and obviously displays the cookies, the values for this domain which we've saved earlier. Now you might be tempted to use cookie super global the same way as we did with post and get by trying to overwrite it. Let's go back to our editor and see what's gonna happen with this. So say we've set these cookies. Let's just keep let's uncomment them again, and let's try and overwrite them. Let's say underscore cookie name equals some other name. We'll see what's going to happen basically. So we have cookie and say school, and we're going to give it a value of some other school. Okay, now if we save everything, preview everything in the browser, refresh it, and as you can see, because obviously I mistyped the school, let's go back to the editor, school. If we go back, refresh it, there we go. This has overwritten these values, you might think. But if I now go back to the editor, I'm going to create the new page. By the way, obviously I've removed the pages from the previous video. Basically I've just kept the index.php. If I create about.php file here, actually this way, and now try to do exactly same thing, I'm just going to print what's in the cookie. If I do it this way, as you can see, we are setting these cookies to name Sebastian Soliński and school SSD tutorials. I'm presumably overwriting them by using this approach which we had with get and post as well, by simply using the index and then assigning the data to it. So we printing on this page values which are obviously overwritten, but let's see if they actually have been overwritten within the file of the cookie browser cookie file. So if we go back to our browser, I refresh the page, they seem to be overwritten here. But if I go to about page, about.php, refresh the page, and as you can see, not quite, because obviously they still keep the original values which we've set to the cookie, which we've added to the cookie file when we first loaded the page. So what happens here basically is in our index.php, we set the cookies, this cookie is saved to the file, and then we are basically trying to overwrite it, but only temporarily. It's not the permanent overwriting basically. It's only because we have access to this super global, we assign temporary name basically to replace the original name from a cookie. But whenever we are going to use the cookie on any other page, when we are not trying, not attempting to overwrite it, it's going to get us the proper value which we set originally within the previous request. So that's how cookies work. So basically, you wouldn't see anyone using cookie this way, because that doesn't really do you any favors. Basically, the cookie is still the same as it was when we set it using the set cookie function.